There are things hidden in the darkness that would like to keep you as their treasure, almost like a trophy over conquering the living. A trophy that does not last in eternity, but feels like it's the one under the grasp of evil, until the evil is ready for a new trophy. Mexico has always been an interesting destination to visit for my friends and I. I decided I wanted to look into booking a trip for us all. These are my high school buddies. Brian, Matt, John, and Jeff. A couple of guys in my college were talking about an island off the coast in the deep Yucatan. We were intrigued, so we decided to book a trip down there. We were going to meet a guide who would show us where all of the places were. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. Traveling to our meeting spot was an adventure in itself. We were taken in a bus to meet our guide off the normal tourist path. Our guide was a small man with a thick accent. Hard to understand, but we understood that we would have to drive further out of town, then take a ferry to our final destination on the island. We finally made it down to the ferry launch, which was more like a creaky old dock than a tin rowboat. My friends were apprehensive at first, but I was able to convince them to go on. The captain of this boat had a strange look in his eye, as if entranced by the idea that there were crazy enough people to even get on this vessel. I understood more of why he gave that look once we saw the island in the distance. The island had a fence built around it as far as I could see. We landed on the shore, made our trek past the giant red gate, but when I looked back to ask the captain what exactly the wall was for, he was already rowing himself away. There were no warning signs, nothing. Anything that could indicate that what we were about to experience was not going to be good. Not knowing what to expect with this trip was the exciting part for us all. We never got involved with parties or drugs, but we loved adventure. We packed camping gear since we wanted to be prepared for anything. The group and I pushed past the red doors, not ready for what was beyond. The first thing that we all noticed were the broken dolls and the doll heads that were lining the walls and the trees. They looked as if they had their eyes on us. It was just obviously ominous. Dismembered doll limbs lined the ground along the walls, bases of the dark red trees. We could see a river in the distance as well as what looked like an outline of a cabin. The guys and I pressed forward, looking for hope that this was just some kind of joke. The cabin started to look more like a shack, moving closer to it. The door seemed to be locked. The windows in the center were just too dirty to see through. I told Brian to see if he could wipe some dirt away. Maybe he could see inside. I heard a slight clicking noise from inside the old shack. Brian didn't even have a chance to move back before the door swung open on its own. We were all about 25 feet away from him, considering we were scared out of our mind. All we could see was black in the doorway. Brian was one of the bravest ones in our group, but before we could tell him not to move beyond the doorway, the door slammed shut behind him. We ran towards the shack in a panic, screaming his name. All we could hear was his muffled scream beyond the door. We tried to pry open the door, but it just wouldn't budge. John tried to smash the glass with a rock, but he just bounced off as if it was made of steel. It was starting to get dark outside with a large red moon, so we decided we have to make a camp or something outside. We can't just leave Brian. I just hope he wasn't playing some sick game on us. It's been about 2 hours since Brian was taken by some mysterious force. We'd started a small campfire just outside. It illuminated the dolls tied to the trees. Such an eerie feeling. They had these black holes where the eyes should have been, torn up all over the place, as if like a blade was drugged through them. All of us were so worried at this point since it was obvious it wasn't a joke. Some of the guys were in tears, just thinking what could have happened to Brian. We weren't even talking to each other, which is not normal for this group. All of a sudden, I heard crunching of leaves all around, like shuffling or something. It seemed like a group of animals were about to descend on our camp. I turned around to see what was behind me, but it was just too dark. Then I heard muffled screams. I turned back to the fire to see what it was. All of my friends are gone. I hear a loud creak from the shack. The door was opening. it was still pitch black inside. I'm so confused. I run over to see if Brian was there. Maybe he could help me figure out what happened. I peer inside the shack, but all I see is a dirt floor and a dark figure in the corner. Wait, it's Brian. He's huddled into a ball. I'm trying to get his attention slowly by putting my hand on his back, but it feels wet, almost like he's just sweating. I look down at my hand, and I realize it's not sweat. It's this blood. I can smell it, I can feel it. Oh my god. I feel myself about to faint, but I pull it together just to see if my friend was alright. He couldn't respond. I started screaming at him. I realized that was not a good idea. I hear something walking up behind me. I turn around and it's just a silhouette of a person. No facial features, no defining marks at all. I hear a faint whisper coming from it saying I wasn't allowed here. Not knowing if I was making things up in my head since it just appeared to be a mannequin. I could also hear Brian start to stand up. I turned to see if I could talk to him, but when I turned, I could feel Brian already putting his hands around my arms, like he's trying to restrain me. I look into his eyes, realizing that his injuries were, well, his eyes. They were no longer there. There was just empty sockets. Nothing there. The blood was pouring out. I couldn't, my chest was starting to hurt. I just couldn't, I'm starting to freak out. I can't even get the words out. Just then, he started screaming in my face. I did the only thing I could to get away. I pried myself out of his arms. I start to try to run towards the doorway, but there's a mannequin there. It was posed. It was posed in this position as if it was going to try to grab me. So I run through it, knocking it out of my way. As I get outside of the shack, I start to run towards the fire, but the fire was out. All I could see were embers and outlines of mannequins, but they were blocking my direction towards the beach. In a panic, I just realized I had to get out of there. I can send police back or something. So I just run through them, knocking them down, getting them out of my way. Once I got to the beach, I finally see a light. The only light I've seen all night. But it's coming from a rowboat just offshore. I shout to them, "Hey, over here, help me." As he comes up, I realize it's the captain from before. This time, he was smiling. I didn't think twice. I jumped into his boat. I told him I needed to get off this evil island. I need to send somebody back to help my friends. Just then, he looks back at me, smiling still. And in a perfect English accent, the captain spoke, "Your friends are trophies now." And he gave out this blood-curdling laugh.